In today's episode, we'll be hearing from Stephen Lutz, Director of Lutz & Associates Chartered Accounting. We'll be hearing from Peter Fielding, CEO and Director of Burleigh Brewing, and we'll be hearing from Professor Justin Craig from the Bond Business School. Peter, in Burleigh Brewing, so a medium enterprise, and you've obviously had your fair share of challenges over the years. Do you have set people that you will go to with your potential plans, your problems, how you may move forward in challenging times? Is there people that you seek advice from?
Absolutely, but always, not just now. I think that was probably one of my big lessons in the early days. I think as a young entrepreneur, there's a sense of, I'll figure it all out, I can do it all, I have to do it all. That's what being an entrepreneur is, I've just got to do it. And what I've learned actually is that asking heaps of questions from all kinds of people is actually the best way to get, in the end I have to make a decision and own it, but getting input from all kinds of layers is actually the best way to really jump forward. And it's actually something that I've had to help some of our management team now learn and kind of say, no, I'm not looking to you to have all the answers. That won't make you a great manager in my eyes. Actually, what I'm looking for is for you to know when you don't know it all, and or even when you think you want to just get some further thinking or assistance and know what to ask, and then find the appropriate people to go and ask. So, faced with a complex decision, there's a range of people I'll talk to, obviously depending on what it is, from, paid advisors, absolutely. But also, how I kind of attack things is to break those bigger decisions down. And so some of the people I will talk to when I'm faced with a big decision like that is actually our team. So it's not necessarily, an external expert or a superpower that, will have the answer. It's kind of gathering from all around and then putting that all into my decision-making computer and coming up with a decision that works. But yeah, other business people, as I say, paid advisors, team members, business books. I'm a bit of a sponge, and it all just adds to what comes out the other end.
Because I learned from people like you, and it brings to mind a guy who said to me one day, he's a leader in an organisation, and he said to me, the two most powerful words in the English language are, help me. And that's through his whole career. He came back to drilling it down to help me, because he turned it around by saying, I know my perspective, help me understand your perspective. What don't I know? And that's exactly what you're doing. And it's another way to build trust, because by saying help me, you're showing you are vulnerable. And that means that that's the definition of trustworthiness.
It took me some time to learn that regardless of what we might think of our own skill set, if we're lucky, we're good at a couple of things, and that's all in life. As Peter knows, my fantasy is to be a rock musician, but my kids are very fortunate that actually that didn't happen. And so I had a far more substantial string to my bow, which was accounting, which doesn't quite fascinate them as much. But the thing about that is none of us are experts in everything. In fact, it's quite the opposite. If we're fortunate that with our background, our dedication to our studies, to our intensity of our career and our family, that we're actually good at a couple of things. And hopefully one of those is human relations, but another one is our skill set, whatever that might be. I use the phrase that even Einstein had trouble combing his hair, but who would dare, say that he had difficulty with that? So acknowledging that I've got this little space and I reckon I can survive in there, and I'm happy to have that little space. Somebody else knows how to make beers and sell that in the marketplace and customers come back for more. I think that's fantastic, and I have no concept of that. But somewhere in there is a business relationship that overlaps, and far more in the engineering and marketing side. So I take the view that everybody has a skill set, and it really is just, again, from their perspective, Justin, as you've said, what is their perspective? How can I tailor this issue to what their kind of scene of the world might be? What input do they have? But how important it is to ask.
So it picks up on the concept of strategy, doesn't it? You know, if you talk about an academic exercise or a strategic plan. And then we also know that when strategies are all very well and good in military terms until someone starts shooting at you, you know. And that's what's happening at the moment, you know, or when you hit the beaches, strategy goes out the window because you can't plan for everything. One of the things that you said, Peter, you said we couldn't plan for this. You know, I know about risk and I actually have my antennas up everywhere. So what did that feel like? I suppose we can drill down a little bit further now to say, what did that feel like? And maybe some of the clients that you had ringing you up to say, help. So what did it feel like?
It felt surreal, for sure. And yeah, there wasn't, you know, you couldn't turn to a page. In fact, I think that's what I said in my first update to the team was, I didn't do this subject at uni. I don't know what, you know, but, you know, one step at a time. And started asking questions, started talking to people, making lists. You know, we just really went into kind of strategy on a different level. We were literally coming into March. We had just started our strategic planning for 2021, and were, you know, talking about all these exciting things we were going to do. And that was one of the things that we said, okay, we can't look that far forward at the moment. And so all that kind of strategy started to become much more immediate stuff. So we literally kind of threw everything down on a whiteboard of what could be all the things. It was kind of doing your risk management planning, but around one thing, you know, and trying to identify all the levels, think all the things. You know, it seemed like there was government support was being mooted, but there was no detail yet, so we had to have a bucket for that. And let's talk to our bank just in case, just they know what we're doing and what we know. Talk to, because we have a big excise obligation as beer brewers in this country, talk to the excise office just to know, we felt if they knew that we were on the front foot and we were on it, and that if they called we would answer the phone, that was going to be an important thing. So yeah, it really was an intense strategy development process, but for things that we couldn't see clearly. So there was a lot of if, buts and maybes, but it felt good to make a plan and then to share that plan through the team. And as things started to evolve, it became clear which bit we had to be working on first. So there were kind of three things that we prioritised as the kind of categories. So one, as I said before, was kind of communication and culture. That was one. Our customers was probably the next thing on our mind. Both the licensed customers that we sell to and also the consumers who drink our beer was, you know, what do we have to think about for them and how we can support them. And the third part was our business overall, the numbers and keeping an eye on costs. And was there any projects that were costing money that we could stop just in case? And we were just even though we're coming into it strong, we wanted to still build our war chest to the extent we already had kind of a war chest, I suppose, by having a strong balance sheet, but we kind of doubled down on that, and that became part of the plan as well. So on the customer side, again, we didn't know how long this was going to go. We didn't know what, but we just knew that our customers were going to be vital on the other side, and the loyalty and the relationships and so on. So literally on the day after they said venues are closing, we called all our tap customers and said, we're coming around today to pick up any full or partial kegs that you've got. We'll take them back. When we're all allowed to open again, we'll give you fresh ones. And that just seemed an obvious thing to us because we cared about them. We cared that when they did open again, our consumers would have fresh beer. We cared about our quality reputation, all of that. So we just did it. But the feedback we got from that was kind of like, wow, you guys don't have to do, well, no, we don't have to do this, but what else do we do, you know? Yeah. And that just came from that kind of strategy session. What do we have to do for customers? And as I say, then the next part of it was about the business, and that was going through every cost line, if we had it. We didn't lay anyone off during that time, but we had a plan of what that would look like if we had to. So it was, strategy on another level.
Not so much the plan, it's the process.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
process of you going through and getting other people's perspectives, and then, okay, you weren't producing a plan per se in a traditional sense.
Yep.
We are going through a process,
Yep.
which is a communication, a stakeholder, a scenario situation. So,
And I think that built confidence just for me too,
yes.
going through that process. You're
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Taking back your customers' half-consumed kegs, I mean, man, that shows that you care. You know, I mean, that was just one of a myriad of issues they had to deal with. Existential is probably another one, but you said, okay, we'll sort that out for you. I just, in preparation today, I spoke earlier about planning, and as I say, it's however formal or informal somebody makes it. I'm a bit of a fan of Dwight Eisenhower and, preparation for D-Day landing. I don't know why, but that just fascinates me. And one of the quotes that he made, which fascinated me, and I'll just read it if I may, quote, "Plans are useless, but planning is everything," close quote. And I kind of went, good enough for him, good enough for me. I'll go a bit further because there's a contrast in there. The definition of emergency means the unexpected. So it won't happen the way you thought, but that thought process will have forced within you an insight to vary the plan, but there is still some kind of vertebrae, some kind of backbone to why we're here, what we're trying to do, what our overall objectives are. Obviously, the circumstances are changed by the minute, of course. Yeah, so I thought that was useful.
We study dynamic capabilities, and that's what it's all about, to actually, and it comes from Lisa's actual opening when she talked about the VUCA world, the volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous world that we live in. And they term that, they come up with that term in the military at the turn of this century. So it's a useful term to actually say, yes, this is, it's volatile, it's uncertain, it's complex and ambiguous, and that's the everyday battle cry for the military. So we actually have literature to actually prepare us for this and leaders in this space. We didn't know that we'd have to be using it at this stage.
I don't know where I heard it. I can't quote the correct person, but someone described it as at the moment trying to play chess in 3D. And that's a bit what it feels like, I think.
That's a great analogy.
Which bit's moving in what direction?
Well, I'll pick up on that because the time is not to be overly precise. Mm-hmm. It's the time to be roughly right. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I like that.
Because you're moving from a time where you would analyse things and over, because you had the data.
Absolutely.
You had the
and
information.
the time to make the decision.
And the time. Well, we don't have either of those things, so let's be roughly right rather than overly precise. Which brings me to another thing that I'm curious about is this saying that what got us here will not get us there. The management style that you were introducing in your company and the companies that you were is formalised, it's structured. Early days it was fluid, it was seat of the pants, it was those sort of things. But is there a time where you had to say, well, we've got to go back to what the early days of the business? Because when you mentioned Amazon, Bezos, he jumped back into the chair, which is my interpretation. We need an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, look, I think one of the things that's come for us, we went from being a startup business of two of us to, now 55, 60 names on the payroll and much more structure than what we had. And one of the things we did in that initial planning of how we're going to attack this was to kind of create battle teams. And whereas we had, the way decisions were made and information flowed and so on, did have somewhat of a structure to it prior, and there's management team meetings and then individual department meetings and so on. But without too much thinking, almost intuitively, the battle teams weren't like that. They were people at all levels from different places based on what issue they were looking at. And that is something we will absolutely keep because that makes so much more sense. And the process, the decision-making process, has been so much more valuable. And I think probably for me, again, that being roughly right has been quite liberating, because it's not my natural instinct. I want to dot all my I's and cross my T's, and wow, it feels it doesn't have to be, yeah. And again, it's this time has given us the permission to behave in a different way like that, and yeah, quite liberating, as I say.
It's a good word. You have the permission to actually, veer off into different directions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that phrase, Justin. In our own world, it has been, this is chaotic, so just get used to that. But and I think the quote was maybe 4 by Solomon, in time this too shall change. So it's really a case now of hanging in there, doing what's right. I sort of have the view, having begun my career in 81, I walked into a recession in my career up front, and so things were very different to what I expected leaving university. But what I have noticed over all of these decades, 4 of them, is that there's always a crisis coming. And so this one is most unusual. It's deadly, so this is very different. Governments are looking at, negative balance sheets, so this is a very, very different one to that extent. But for anyone in business, we've just got to get used to, I don't know what the figure is, 1 in 10, 1 in 7, 1 in 14, you're going to have a very, very bad year. Prepare for it. So it's a little bit like you've got to know your seasons, and obviously Burleigh Brewing gears up for Christmas. But perhaps there's another month of the year where people don't buy beer. Is it in June, when it's the coldest month of the year? We all have our cycles, so you need your business to make profits on the other months when obviously it is high season, and to carry you through those quiet times. It's the same with the business cycle. I can't say to any of the viewers when the next one is, what it will be, how big or wide it will be, but I can assure you that there's another one coming. I hope it's a very long time away, and I hope it doesn't hurt anyone like this one. But we have to build our businesses if we choose to work towards building up a good, strong, valuable business, and maybe sell down our equity or pass it on to the kids or whatever it is. We have a as Peter was saying, a long-term view on this. We just need to know that we need to learn from this one, as unique and awkward as it has been. There are some very important skills here, some of which are textbook-driven, and others are obviously quite extraordinary and dynamic. But we need that in our toolkit for our business when the next one comes, and we don't quite know what that would be. Is it a digital revolution? I have no idea. So I just take the view that your business needs to say, okay, if I plan that I'm going to lose money 1 out of every 7, well, I've got to make the other 6 really pay, and I've got to be ready for the next one.
So the word inevitable, is part of your lexicon or your actual narrative.
If I may, Justin, it does bring to mind Friedrich Nietzsche. If it doesn't kill you, it'll be good for you. And the first time I heard that, I must admit in my naivety, I scorned at it. But below the sarcasm of that, there is very much a self-learning tool if one prepares to take that on board. Because in this environment, and as Peta looked at her business, I've not heard her team talking about what the government should do, what somebody else should do, and what tax credits there should be. This team's all about saying, this is what we do. Our customers still want our product. That's critical. Let's go and talk to those people. And as they prosper through this, so will our business. And we'll leave government issues to the government.
There's nothing more fundamental than that, is there?
Yeah.
To say. Okay.
So for our viewers in small business or entrepreneurs starting out, what 3 tips could you give them to survive a future crisis? Is there some simple business fundamentals that they really should be ensuring they're undertaking to prepare for what may happen in the future?
Yeah, Lisa, if I go first?
Go for it.
Yeah. I think the first one is make sure that what it is you want to sell, you're good at it, and it's what people want to buy. And that might sound so obvious, but man, I have seen a few people trying to, if I can use the phrase, flog a dead horse. Sorry to any vets. So it's very much, can I provide something of value to people who would give me money rather than them do it themselves? And that can be as basic as we're having a retaining wall done. When I was younger, I did my own retaining walls and regret it every time. This time I've said we're paying somebody who's stronger, smarter, cleverer, faster at this, and they're doing it a better job than I could ever do. But the point is, they can do it, and I'm prepared to pay them. So I think that's the first thing. Investing in your business, and I touched on capital before. I have found too many businesses are good at something, and it begins as a job, as a salary, as an income, and then they're not treating it as a business. So investing in your business, what I call capital, put your money down as well as your own labour, so that you can say, I need to have a plan, a team, the right infrastructure. Warren Buffett always said the business that doesn't have the latest equipment is already paying for it. And I love that phrase. So, let's not borrow, mum's old computer. Let's make sure that if we're going to take on the marketplace, we're kitted out. And that might cost $100,000 or 50 or 250, so that when you're in front of servicing your customers, you're not looking over your shoulder of, I've got to ring the bank because I can't pay the wages next week. And that a lot of businesses get their core technical skill distracted by these mundane business issues. It's because they're just undercapitalised. So that to me. The third point is invest in yourself. Anyone who hasn't had some kind of formal education over the last 10 years, I would strongly recommend that they do so. There is a lot about practical experience on the street, and there is a lot of very valuable information in a formal educational environment. I'm very lucky to have had exposure to that through Bond University, and I'm very grateful for that. That's very much a case of there's no point saying I don't need that, because you're then saying I don't know what I don't know. Far better to talk to the experts and then have the luxury of mixing the two. The fourth point is make sure that you can sell your...
Overachiever, you only asked him three.
I am sorry. Last point. I am sorry. Can I use that phrase when I'm testing the next brew, Peter? I'm over drinking. But the last one is make sure you sell your product at a margin, at a good margin, not only for your salary and to pay the taxes and to pay off the bank loan, but so you've still got some money left over to reinvest in your business, in the next innovation, in the next product that your people want to design and create, so that you've got money in the bank, hay in the shed for when the next crisis inevitably arrives.
Look, I'm always reluctant to give, the three bits of advice or anything, because I feel like I'm still learning. Well, I am still learning as well, so I don't know the magic three. But three things that I've learned, I guess. Yeah. One I already touched on, and that is to accept that you don't know it all, and that actually asking is a really good, vital thing. One, I very early on started to kind of have this little mantra of let's treat the business like there's a lot more zeros in the bank account than what there are on the right side of the and that was about, we knew where we wanted it to get to. And so kind of adopting the mindset of treating it as if we were already there helped us with things like, we don't need a process for that, we're only little. No, actually, we want to be here, and when we're there, we'll need a process. Let's start it now. So, and we didn't get all of that perfect, but certainly a lot of things we started sooner than we really needed to that have, really helped as we've grown. Because once you're already, particularly in a growing business, all your time can be chewed up just kind of keeping up with yourself. There's not the time to stop and go, well, let's look at this policy, and not just policies, but processes and procedures, and even the respect you have for your business. It's not just, that's just my little thing. That's my little thing with lots of pretend zeros in the bank account, and one day, it'll really matter. So that kind of, I suppose, approach has really helped. And the other one I'd say would be just really knowing what you're doing and why you're doing it. And I think in some ways that those two things can not change, but they can mould as the business changes. In a sense, I think anyone who starts a business, it's a very selfish undertaking. Most of the time it's all about you and something you want to do, and you write your business plan and you imagine yourself there and doing it, and it's kind of a very inward-looking thing in a sense. I remember the day that I was driving to work, and it was like a lightning bolt. And suddenly, it wasn't about me anymore. It was about this responsibility I had for these people who'd chosen to say, yep, I'll come and work for you. And now I had a responsibility to make sure that I could keep employing them and that they went home happy, and that, and that actually became my why kind of changed. Well, it didn't change, but the focus changed. I was always kind of the business and people, that was my passion. Brennan's the brewing and the beer passion, and the two went well together. But I just remember this moment of clarity of, I'm now doing this for other people, and actually it got me fired up.
So there's a skill set and a mindset. A lot of the times we do need the fundamentals, and we need to reinforce that. But what you're saying, then, that's the how. But the why needs to be reinforced. And in your experience that you shared, that was the light bulb moment that, well, I've got responsibilities here. It's not just about me. So, beautiful.
Do we have any more? Are we winding up?
Was
that a wind up?
I could go all day with these.
How much?
Over an hour.
Okay. We'll just ask. Are we?
1 hour and 7 minutes.
Wow, doesn't time fly when you're having fun?
So you,
Couple more.
Quite welcome to keep going.
We'll just do a couple more questions, and then I think this should split to 2 nice little 30-minute ones.
Yeah, and then when you get to the end of that, just come to a natural close. Like, just thank people for watching, remind them that there are more in this series, and you'll see them next time.
All right.
It doesn't need to be too long, but
And then the last thing I'll get you to do at the very end is we'll just go back to your intro at the very top, and then if we want to subject the two topic points, then we put each of those in front of the two.
Okay. Did you have an area you want to?
No, you please go as you wish. I just had I had prepared a quote
Yes.
to finish on.
Okay.
And as the discussion has flowed, I think it is becoming more appropriate. So just, if I know at some stage, or at some stage on closing, I've got a closing comment, if that's all right.
Well, you can lead off with a closing question,
So we're wrapping up now.
unless you've got more.
Okay.
You want to head down other avenues?
No, I want to just reinforce.
Okay.
So I do want to pick up on one thing, and it's to do with cash. Because let's put everything aside. Cash is king. As well, we've got different ways of saying that, but cash, to reinforce that, we're talking about fundamentals here. Without cash, but you are a big fan or a big proponent of doing a cash projection.
Yes, Justin.
So, and people would say, well, gosh, we don't do that. We just count. We just look at the bank account to see, or look at the till, So what is that? It sort of gets into say, okay, here, how do I need to improve my basic fundamentals and get back to something? Because if there's nothing more fundamental to understand, it's our cash.
Thank you, Justin. And as a foundational issue, cash is king. However you want to phrase that, it's the lifeblood of a business, that and customers. But you can't service your customer without cash. It is, in my mind, my phrase, it's the canary in the coal mine. A good friend of mine said once, you can run at a loss for a couple of years, but you can only run out of cash once. And when you can't pay your creditors, you spend all day on the phone juggling your bank account. When you can't pay your staff, you don't have a business anymore. All of a sudden, they're looking over their shoulder. Cash is fundamental, as you said before, Justin, with that element of trust. Yes, you'll be paid next week. That's fine. That's why people are in business. That's the oxygen they need to survive. So in my mind, and again, charging an appropriate value for the service that you provide so that there's margin sufficient to pay down debt, to support the family, to satisfy the shareholders for their risk of capital, and still money to reinvest in the business. And again, we can't do any of those things if there isn't just a natural balance between purchase of our raw materials and cash in the bank. And as I say, well, one day I had to represent a company, mortgagee in possession, and stand down a whole bunch of people in the CFMEU and the BLF, which was probably not one of the highlights of my career, but it was a fairly interesting time. even though it was not my business, I the fear, the anxiety was palpable that this is not a good situation and no one's happy, because there are human beings that have worked in good faith and their wages are not paid, and that breaches all of the trust that you spoke of earlier, Justin. So to me, cash, and no surprise that the alliteration starting with C is customer. You've got to love them both.
Yeah, I really do want to reinforce that cash, but as well as that, it's sort of related to that, is that you've been into a lot of businesses over your short career.
Thank you.
No, but you've got a shortcut, a mental shortcut, a rubric that you look at a business and you can tell. And what are some of the things that someone might just say, okay, here that they might be sitting here watching this and they're a little bit guilty of a couple of these things. What's that litmus test that you have about business? Obviously, it's balance sheet, cash, people, but is there something there that you sort of say?
Yeah. Once one's at a desk, the first thing is show me your business activity statements, your receipts for the quarterly superannuation guarantee, are the rents outstanding? Prove to me that you've just paid these fundamental expenses. Let me have a look at your bank statements. But before you get there, has the CFO resigned? Has a couple of directors resigned? When you walk in, I use the phrase of looking under the carpet. There was a business I was engaged by the bank to try and help them out of their problem. The first question when I walked in after they made me a cup of tea was, whose convertible Benz is parked out the front? Oh, the major shareholder. I don't think anyone needs me to tell them where their business is now. Yes. And the enthusiasm I had to try and help these people, it was like the wind just went out of the sail. So very much that's the case. A little bit further, people are spending time, as we touched on earlier, they're talking to bankers all the time. They're talking to their creditors about trying to negotiate supply of this month's materials, even though they haven't paid last month's invoices. And again, all this time spent about managing the money in the business should not be spent like that. The creditors should just be paid. The computer does that these days. The wages should just go through the computer. These should not be surprises to anyone. So cash flow forecasts, to me, Justin, coming back to it, is cash flow will tell you first if you've got a problem if you're blind to all of the other whispers, your cash flow will actually shout at you that you've got a problem. Cash flow forecast is simply writing down on a piece of butcher's paper, which I used to do in the old days, and simply say, well, that's what I think the business will do. Here's when I think the debtors will come in. But, I have a quarterly BAS to pay. I have a quarterly income tax bill to pay. The superannuation for my staff is here. The wages are fortnightly. It's not rocket science. It's absolutely basic common sense. But it's critical because if your customers are important, because if you don't have them, you don't have a business, cash is equally so. Because if you don't have cash, you don't have a business. But the whole point is you have to manage the cash. And going back to Peter's point earlier, she felt responsible for her staff, their families, their mortgages. You're handling somebody else's money. Your share of that as a stakeholder is only a small percentage. The taxman wants some of it, your staff wants some of it, the landlords want some of it, the creditors do, and quite rightly so. So you're actually in a fiduciary position to be responsible for everybody else's way of them making a living as well. So cash flow projections, if people are a little bit confused about that, if they haven't heard of it before or they kind of think that's just an accounting luxury or a nice to have, no, it's not. It's critical. I don't know of many people who get in a car without a driver's license. If you're running a business, engaging staff, you've got debts to the bank, my recommendation, please, is to have it all the way out to Christmas, and we are in June already. Even big things like we're going on a holiday, well, maybe 1 year, even the P&I on your home loan, any big expenses, just put it down there. So as soon as your business gives a wobble, you can actually understand what it is. And going back to that an earlier point, by talking to the bank and saying, I think I need money in 2 months' time, will you help me please? That's a far better conversation to have them ringing you going, you're in overdraft, what's wrong? As Peter said, at least we'll answer the phone. Yeah, so I can't, to me, I can't overemphasise.
All of that is obviously true. I think I just need to kind of put a little shout out for startup entrepreneurs, because I think it feels almost like a rite of passage that you have to lose sleep over, am I going to be able to pay the bills tomorrow in those early days? And this goes against all the accounting advice, I know, but I'm sure there aren't many, or a great many, very successful businesses have been through those early days of, you think you've got enough capital, and even if you maybe have got plenty of capital, those early days just throw things at you where you're needing funding 6 months before what you thought you might, or whatever it is. So, and that's probably where, when I was saying before about treat the business like it's got a whole lot more zeros in the bank account, doing a cash flow forecast from day dot, even though you kind of think, oh, I'm not at that stage yet, and so on, certainly helps. But I would hate for any, startup entrepreneur to lose faith because they're going through those. I think, there are some early battles you have to go through, but so long as you've got the plan, been through the process of planning, and you know what the game looks like, and how you can get through it. It feels like that.
Well, thank you both for your words of wisdom, and Justin for your academic views on that. And do you have any final comments, Peter or Steve, to leave with us today?
Just thank you for having me. I really enjoyed the chat.
Likewise, but if I may, there was just a quote, another quote that I came up with. I like to learn from people who have been before me, and they're kind enough to leave a little bit for me to learn. I appreciate that. Parents would actually know who Theodore Zeus Gazelle is. He wrote a couple of books called Dr. Zeus. This quote is, when something bad happens to you, you have three choices. You can either let it define you, let it destroy you, or you can let it strengthen you. Now, that's an interesting quote, but the person who brought that to my attention was in the letters to shareholders by Jeff Bezos of Amazon, who writes his annual letter. He said, I've read that and I'm very optimistic about which of these civilization is going to choose. And I thought, well, good enough for him. I'll follow the same path.
Well, thank you for your time today, Peter, and thank you, Steve, for joining us.
Pleasure.
And thank you, Justin, for your insights. There will be more episodes looking at business fundamentals coming soon. Thank you.